The Great Hall of Concordia Prime stretched out like a metal ocean. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, their voices creating a sound that no human ear could understand without help. The translation machines worked hard to change all the different languages into something everyone could hear. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the human section, her hands folded on the smooth table before her. The golden speaking staff lay next to her fingers. For 50 years, humanity had been part of this great council of stars. 50 years of trying to fit in with beings who had traveled space for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. The Zephyrians spoke first. Their crystal bodies caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. When they talked, their voices sounded like singing glass. Their leader, a tall being named Crystal Song of Truth, stood and raised what humans thought of as arms. "We bring serious concerns to this council," Crystal Song of Truth said. The translation made the voice sound cold and formal. "The humans spread through our trade routes like a disease. Their ways of doing business corrupt our ancient methods. They make deals that hurt the balance we have kept for 1,000 years. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She had expected this day to come, but hoping and knowing were different things. Around the hall, other species nodded their agreement. The insect-like beings from the hierarchy clicked their approval. The water-dwelling DeepMind Collective made bubbling sounds that meant they agreed. Next came the DeepMind Collective. Their representative floated in a tank of blue liquid that smelled like ocean storms. The being inside looked like a mix between a fish and a tree with branches that moved like arms in the water. "Look at these pictures," the DeepMind being said. Images appeared in the air above the council hall. They showed human factories on colony worlds, human ships moving between stars, human cities growing on planets that had been empty before. Humans destroy the natural order. They build without asking the land. They take without giving back. Their industrial methods poison the careful balance that took millions of years to create. Sarah wanted to stand up and speak. She wanted to tell them about the hospitals humans had built, about the farms that fed hungry worlds, about the schools where human teachers worked with alien children. But she had learned to wait her turn in this place. The council had rules, and humans were still new here. More species spoke against humanity. The gas beings from the void reaches talked about human ships that moved too fast and scared their young. The rock people from the heavy worlds complained that humans mined too deep and took too much. Each complaint built on the last one like stones in a wall. Finally, council speaker Vorthon stood up. The insect being was 3 times taller than any human, with 6 arms and eyes that looked like black mirrors. When Vorthon spoke, everyone else became quiet. "We have heard the concerns of our elder members," Vorthon said. The translation made the clicking sounds into words, but Sarah could hear the anger underneath. "Humanity has been part of our council for only 50 years. In that short time, they have caused more disruption than any species in our recorded history." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She looked at the other humans at her table. Ambassador Rodriguez from Mars looked pale. Captain Williams from the Luna fleet kept opening and closing his hands like he wanted to fight, something he could not see. "The elder species of this council have wisdom, earned through millions of years of peaceful cooperation," Vorthon continued. "We have built a galaxy where war is rare and suffering is small. We have created trade routes that benefit all. We have made laws that protect the weak and guide the strong." The council speaker's 6 arms moved as he talked, pointing to different sections of the Great Hall. "But humans do not follow our ways. They act first and ask permission later. They solve problems with force when patience would work better. They change things that should not be changed." Sarah finally stood up. The golden speaking staff felt heavy in her hands as she lifted it. This was how humans could talk in the council. Only when they held the staff could their words be heard by everyone. Council speaker: "If I may respond to these concerns," Sarah began, but Vorthon raised one of his 6 hands. "The time for human words has passed, Ambassador Chen. This council has made its decision." Sarah felt the blood leave her face. Around the hall, she saw aliens turning away from the human section. The translation machines around her table began to dim their lights. "The Galactic Council hereby removes humanity's speaking privileges," Vorthon announced. His voice echoed through the great hall like thunder. "Until humans learn the wisdom of restraint and the value of harmony with established order, your voice will not be heard among the civilized species of this galaxy." 2 guards, tall beings covered in what looked like living metal, walked toward the human table, Sarah watched them come, still holding the golden speaking staff. She had carried this staff for 10 years, had spoken for her entire species with it. Ambassador Chen, one of the guards said, its voice sounding like wind through metal pipes. Please return the speaking staff to the council. Sarah looked down at the golden rod in her hands. She thought about all the times she had used it to ask for help for human colonies. All the times she had tried to explain human ways to beings who thought in completely different ways. All the votes where human voices had mattered. She placed the staff on the table and stepped back. The guard picked up the staff and walked away. As it left, the translation machines around the human table went completely dark. Sarah could still hear the thousands of aliens in the hall, but now their words meant nothing to her. She was surrounded by voices she could not understand. Vorthon spoke again, but this time the humans heard only clicking and buzzing sounds. The council speaker raised a device that Sarah recognized as a long-range communicator. This message would go to Earth, to all human colonies, to every human ship in space. A human translator at a far table, one who worked for the council instead of for humanity, spoke the final message. Humans of Earth and the colonies, your voice in this council is ended. You may continue existing under current trade agreements, but no new diplomatic contact will be permitted. Prove your worth through actions, not words. When you have learned wisdom, perhaps your voice will return. Sarah sat down heavily in her chair. Around her, the other human representatives looked like they had been hit by invisible weapons. The Great Hall continued its business as if humanity had simply disappeared. Ambassador Rodriguez leaned close to Sarah's ear. What do we do now? He whispered. Sarah watched the council continue its meeting without them. Aliens who had once nodded politely when she spoke now looked through her like she was made of glass. The section where humans sat had become invisible to the rest of the galaxy. Now we go home, Sarah said quietly, and we figure out how to speak without words. The humans gathered their things and left the Great Hall. Behind them, the business of the galaxy continued without their voices. The council had spoken, and humanity would have to find a new way to be heard. 5 years had passed since the council took away humanity's voice. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her new office on Luna Station, looking out at the blue marble of Earth through the clear metal windows. Her title had changed from ambassador to director of the Silent Protocol Initiative. The humans had given her this job because someone needed to figure out how to live in a galaxy that would not listen to them. The changes had started slowly. Human ships found themselves refused docking at council stations. Trade routes that had been open for decades suddenly required permits that humans could not get because they could not speak in council meetings. Medical supplies for human colonies had to be purchased through third parties who charged extra for the trouble. The worst moment came during the plague on Kepler 442b. The human colony there had been struck by a disease that killed quickly and spread faster. Sarah had sent message after message to the council, begging for the medical knowledge that could save her people. The DeepMind Collective had medicine that could cure the plague in days. The Zephyrians had healing crystals that could stop the spread. None of them answered. Sarah remembered getting the final casualty report. 3,000 humans had died before human scientists found their own cure. Dr. Martinez and her team had worked for 60 straight hours, testing and failing and testing again, until they created a medicine that worked better than anything the council species had. That was when Sarah understood what humanity had to do. "Show me the latest reports," Sarah said to Captain Williams, who now ran the Silent Operations Division. Williams put a data pad on her desk. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with hundreds of small blue dots scattered across it. Each dot represented a human action in the past month. The Tau Ceti mining colony was saved last week, Williams said, pointing to one of the dots, structural failure in their main support columns. Our engineers left repair materials and complete instructions outside their main gate. No signatures, no identification, just the materials they needed. Sarah nodded and touched another dot. "What about the Zephyrian nursery world?" "Water contamination crisis," Williams replied. Someone had dumped industrial waste in their main water supply. Our environmental team spent 2 weeks building filtration systems. They worked at night and left before dawn. The Zephyrians woke up one morning to find their water running clean again. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. "Any trace back to us?" "None. Our teams are getting very good at the ghost operations. They call us the Silent Guardians in some parts of the galaxy. But they don't know it's humans doing the work. The strategy had developed naturally. If humans could not speak in the council, they would speak through actions. If the galaxy would not listen to human words, perhaps it would notice human deeds. Human medical teams set up free clinics at the edges of council space. They treated anyone who came, asking no questions and taking no payment. 6 Epherians found their crystals polished and their harmonic frequencies restored. Injured hierarchy workers discovered their broken limbs healed with techniques that human doctors had learned from studying their own species, human. Engineers began solving problems that council species had struggled with for years. Power grid failures fixed overnight with no explanation. Communication networks mysteriously upgraded with new technology. Transportation systems that had been breaking down suddenly worked better than ever. The humans never left their names. They never asked for credit. They simply did the work and disappeared. The interesting part, Williams continued, is how the technology exchange is working. Without access to council databases, our people have had to develop everything from scratch. And it turns out when humans get creative without restrictions, they come up with some pretty amazing stuff. Sarah looked at another section of the report. Human ships now traveled faster than any council vessel. Human communication systems could send messages across the galaxy in minutes instead of hours. Human defensive shields could stop weapons that had been cutting through council armor for centuries. The quantum drive project is ahead of schedule, Williams said. Dr. Yamamoto thinks we'll have ships that can cross the galaxy in days instead of months. And the new communication network doesn't need council relay stations at all. Sarah understood what this meant. Humanity was becoming independent of the council in ways that went far beyond politics. They were building their own version of galactic civilization, one that worked without permission from anyone. Her personal communicator buzzed with an emergency signal. Sarah activated the device and listened to the report with growing concern. Director Chen, the voice said, "This is Captain Santos with the exploration fleet. We've detected something at the galaxy's edge. Large objects moving in from deep space. They're not sending any signals we recognize, and they're not stopping for anything in their path." Sarah felt cold fear in her stomach. How large? Each object is the size of a small moon, Director. And there are hundreds of them. Williams leaned over to hear the report. His face went pale when he heard the numbers. Are they heading for any inhabited systems? Sarah asked. Yes, Director. Their current course will take them through the outer helix systems in approximately 6 months. 17 different species have colonies in that region. Sarah closed her eyes and thought quickly. The outer helix was controlled by the Council. If something was threatening those systems, the Council would need to respond. But would they ask for human help? Would they even tell humans what was happening? Captain Santos, keep monitoring the objects but maintain distance. Send all data to the analysis teams on Earth. And Captain? Yes, Director? Don't make contact with anything until we know what we're dealing with. Sarah ended the communication and looked at Williams. How long since we've heard anything from the Council? 3 years, Director. Not since they returned our request for emergency medical aid with a form letter about proper diplomatic channels. Sarah walked back to the window and looked out at Earth. Somewhere down there, human children were learning to read. Human scientists were working on problems that could change the galaxy. Human artists were creating beauty that no other species had ever imagined. And now something was coming from the darkness between galaxies, heading straight for the worlds that had rejected humanity's voice. Williams, I want you to increase our monitoring of Council communications. If something is coming, they'll know about it soon. And when they do, Director? Sarah turned away from the window. When they do, we'll have to decide whether to help people who silenced us or let them face the darkness alone. Williams nodded slowly. And if they don't ask for help? Sarah thought about the 3,000 humans who had died on Kepler 442b, while the Council stayed silent. Then she thought about the alien children who would die if whatever was coming reached the outer helix systems. Then we'll have to decide what kind of species we want to be, Sarah said. The kind that helps only when asked, or the kind that helps because it's right. Outside the window, Earth continued turning, carrying 8 billion humans who had learned to live without the galaxy's permission. Soon they might have to decide whether the galaxy deserved their protection. The Council's emergency session began at what humans would have called dawn, though time meant different things to species that lived in space. Council Speaker Vorthian stood before the Great Assembly, his 6 arms moving in patterns that showed Deep worry to those who understood his species' body language. The objects have been identified, Vorthon announced. His voice carried through the translation systems to thousands of beings throughout the Great Hall. Our best scientists have studied the data. What approaches us is not natural. On the Yar, massive display screens above the assembly, images appeared that made many species gasp in their own ways. The objects were not ships as anyone understood ships. They looked like metal storms with pieces that moved and changed and grew larger as they consumed everything in their path. Crystal Song of Truth spoke for the Zephyrians. Our harmonic analysis shows these machines tear apart matter at the atomic level. They consume planets, stars, even space dust. Everything they eat makes them stronger and helps them build more of themselves. The Deep Mind Collective representative floated in his tank, branches moving rapidly in the blue liquid. We have seen this pattern before, in our oldest memories. Ancient stories speak of machine swarms that devoured entire regions of space. We thought they were myths. They are not myths, said a new voice. An ancient being from the archive species, so old that it remembered when the council was first formed, spoke from its life support chamber. My people's records go back 50,000 years. 3 times in our history these devourers have come from the space between galaxies. Each time, they consumed everything in their path until something stopped them. Vorthon's insect eyes focused on the archive keeper. What stopped them before? Unknown, the archive keeper replied. The records from those times are incomplete. We know only that they stopped and that many species died before they did. The hall filled with the sounds of fear from a dozen different species. The clicking of hierarchy anxiety, the humming of Zephyrian worry, the bubbling of deep mind distress. Each species expressed terror in their own way, but the emotion was the same. Admiral Thrust of Victory, the military commander of the council forces, stood to address the assembly. The warrior species looked like armored bears with too many teeth, and when they spoke of war, others listened. Our combined fleets have moved to intercept the devourers at the outer helix. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop stars. Surely these machines, no matter how large, cannot stand against the united military might of the Council. 3 days later, Admiral Thrust of Victory's confidence was proven wrong. The battle at Helix Station lasted 18 hours. The Council's finest ships carrying weapons developed over thousands of years of peaceful cooperation met the devourer swarm in the darkness between stars. The Zephyrian harmonic weapons, which could shatter mountains by finding the right frequency, had no effect on the machines. The devourers simply changed their resonance to match whatever frequency the crystals produced. The hierarchy's precision, plasma beams which could cut through any known metal, struck the swarms and were absorbed. The machines took the energy and used it to build more of themselves. The Deep Mind's biological weapons, living acids that could eat through anything organic, simply had nothing to affect. The devourers were pure machine, with no biological components to attack. Worst of all, the machines learned from every attack. Each weapon used against them was studied, analyzed, and countered within minutes. By the end of the first hour, the devourers had developed defenses against everything the Council could throw at them. Admiral Thrust of Victory sent his final message as his flagship was being torn apart around him. They adapt to everything. Nothing we have can stop them. May the stars forgive us for our pride. The loss of the Outer Helix fleet sent shockwaves through Council space. For the first time in thousands of years, the Council faced an enemy they could not defeat through traditional means. Emergency meetings ran day and night. Every species contributed their best weapons, their most advanced technology, their most creative military minds. Nothing seemed to work. The devourers continued their slow advance toward the inner systems, consuming everything in their path. The Tau Ceti system fell next. The humans who had once lived there had been evacuated years earlier, when the Council trade restrictions made the colony unsustainable. Now the devourers tore apart the star itself, using its energy to build even larger machines. Then came Kepler 442b, the world where 3,000 humans had died from plague, while the Council remained silent. The devourers consumed it in 6 hours. leaving nothing but empty space where a planet had existed. In the Council's private chambers, voices that had never shown doubt began to crack with desperation. "We need new strategies," Crystal Song of Truth said, his harmonic voice now discordant with stress. "Everything we know about warfare is useless against these machines. Our historical records show similar machine invasions," said the DeepMind representative. "But the records also show that someone always found a way to stop them. There must be knowledge we are missing." Council Speaker Vorthon sat in his Iao meditation chamber, staring at reports that grew worse each day. The Devourers had consumed 12 systems and showed no signs of slowing down. Refugee ships filled with desperate beings fled ahead of the advancing swarm, carrying stories of entire worlds disappearing in hours. In the quiet of his chamber, Vorthon thought about the one species not represented in the emergency sessions. The humans had been silent for 5 years, cut off from council communications and forbidden from participating in galactic affairs. But Vorthon remembered the human reputation from before the silencing. Other species had called them unpredictable, aggressive, chaotic. They solved problems in ways that made no sense to beings who had spent millennia perfecting careful, logical approaches to conflict. The humans had a saying that the council translators had never been able to properly render into other languages. "Think outside the box." It meant approaching problems from directions that conventional wisdom said were wrong. As another report arrived showing the fall of the Vega colonies, Vorthon made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. He activated his personal communicator and set it to broadcast on frequencies that only human ships used, but when he tried to send the message, his pride stopped him. To ask for human help would be to admit that the Council's greatest mistake had been silencing the one species that might save them. Instead, Vorthon sent a general distress signal to all frequencies, knowing that humans would receive it but not having to specifically ask for their aid. The message was simple: unknown hostiles consuming outer systems. All available forces requested for defense of inhabited worlds. The humans would know what that meant. The question was whether they would care enough to answer a call from people who had taken away their voice. In his chamber, surrounded by reports of advancing death, Council Speaker Vorthon waited to see if the species he had silenced would choose to save the galaxy that had rejected them. Admiral Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the human flagship Defiant Silence, watching the tactical display show the destruction of another Council world. The Devourers had consumed the Arcturus colonies 12 hours ago. 16 billion beings had died while the Council's remaining fleets fell back in complete disorder. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "we're receiving the Council's distress signal again. They're requesting aid from all available forces." Maria looked at the message without responding. Behind her, Captain Rodriguez from the Luna Defense Force shook his head in disgust. 5 years, Rodriguez said. 5 years of silence when we asked for help. 5 years of treating us like we don't exist. And now they want our aid? The plague victims on Kepler 442b didn't live to see this day, added Dr. Chen, who had joined the military fleet as an advisor. She was no longer an ambassador to anywhere, but her knowledge of alien species made her valuable to the war effort. Maria understood their anger. Every human did, but as she watched another red dot disappear from the tactical display, representing millions of lives snuffed out by the machines, she knew that personal feelings could not guide her decision. "How many ships do we have in the area?" Maria asked her tactical officer. 47 vessels, Admiral, all equipped with the new quantum drives and adaptive shielding. The Devourer swarms outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Maria nodded. The humans had spent 5 years developing technology without Council interference. Their ships now moved faster than anything in the galaxy. Their weapons drew power from quantum fluctuations that most species had not even discovered yet. Their defensive systems could adapt to new threats in real time, but they had never faced anything like the Devourers. "Admiral," her sensor officer called out, "we're detecting massive Council fleet movements. Looks like they're making a stand at the Helix station." On the main screen, the tactical display showed the desperate situation. The remaining Council forces had gathered at a strategic point where several major trade routes crossed. If the Devourers broke through here, they would have clear access to the core worlds where most of the galaxy's population lived. The Council fleet was impressive by their standards. 300 ships from a dozen different species, carrying weapons that could destroy moons and shields that could deflect solar flares. But Maria had seen the battle reports from previous engagements. None of it would matter against machines that adapted to every attack. "Admiral Santos," Dr. Chen said quietly, "the Council made their choice 5 years ago. We owe them nothing." Maria turned to look at the woman who had once spoken for all of humanity in the Galactic Assembly. "You're right, Doctor. We owe the Council nothing." She paused, watching the display as devourer swarms moved steadily toward the Council's last stand. "But we don't do this for the Council," Maria continued. "We do it for the Zephyrian children who will die if those machines reach their nursery worlds. We do it for the DeepMind families fleeing ahead of the swarm. We do it for every being in this galaxy who never asked to be caught between Council pride and machine hunger." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "And we do it because that's who we are." "Yes," Maria agreed. "That's exactly who we are." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all human vessels in the region. We're going to war." The Battle of Helix Station had been raging for 4 hours when the human fleet arrived. Admiral Thrust of Victory's replacement, a young hierarchy commander named Sharp Strike of Justice, was broadcasting desperate orders to his fragmenting forces. "Fall back to defensive position 7, Sharp Strike commanded. "All Zephyrian units focus harmonic barrage on the lead elements." The harmonic weapons fired, sending waves of crystalline music toward the devourer swarm. The machines absorbed the energy and continued advancing. Plasma beams and particle weapons followed, with the same result. The Council forces were dying by the hundreds, and their weapons were only making the enemy stronger. That was when the human ships appeared. They came out of quantum space like ghosts, materializing from nothing. Sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around them, moving in patterns that defied everything the Council knew about space combat. Sharp Strike of Justice stared at his displays in confusion. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. Are you reinforcements from the inner systems?" The human ships did not respond. They simply moved into attack formation and began engaging the devourers with weapons that Council sensors could not properly identify. Maria Santos watched her tactical display as the human fleet deployed. "All units engage freely. Remember, these machines adapt to repeated attacks, so keep changing your approach." The first human salvo struck the devourer swarm like lightning hitting water. Quantum disruptors tore holes in space itself, creating vortexes that consumed machine components faster than they could adapt. Plasma cannons fired bursts of controlled stellar matter that burned at temperatures found only in the cores of stars. But the real surprise came when the devourers tried to adapt to human weapons. Instead of finding predictable energy patterns to counter, they encountered technology that changed itself faster than they could analyze it. Human weapons shifted frequency, power output, and targeting algorithms every few seconds. The quantum disruptors rotated through 17 different dimensional phases. The plasma cannons adjusted their stellar temperature matrices continuously. For the first time since they had arrived in the galaxy, the devourers found themselves facing weapons they could not immediately adapt to. "Impossible," Sharp Strike whispered as he watched human ships tear through machine formations that had been unstoppable. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Chen, monitoring Council communications from the defiant silence, smiled grimly. "They built their weapons to fight us," she said to Admiral Santos. "Machines that learn and adapt to any attack. So we built weapons that never attack the same way twice." The battle raged for 6 more hours. Human ships danced between devourer formations, striking quickly and moving before the machines could respond. When the swarms tried to surround human vessels, the ships simply vanished into quantum space and reappeared elsewhere. But the human fleet was taking damage. The devourers might not be able to adapt quickly enough to stop human attacks, but their numbers were overwhelming. For every machine destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez reported, "we've lost 8 ships and 17 more are heavily damaged. At this rate, we'll be overwhelmed in 2 hours." Maria studied the tactical display. The Council forces had stopped retreating and were now fighting alongside the humans, but they were still essentially useless against the machines. The real burden of the battle fell on the 47 human vessels facing a swarm of 50,000 enemies. "All ships, prepare for final assault pattern," Maria ordered. "We're going to break their command structure." Dr. Chen looked at the Admiral with alarm. "Maria, the command ships are in the center of the swarm. We'll never reach them. Maybe not, Maria replied, but we're going to try. The human fleet formed up for what everyone knew would be a suicide run. 29 surviving ships against the heart of the Devourer swarm. They would strike fast, do as much damage as possible, and die fighting. As they accelerated toward the machine formation, Admiral Santos opened a channel to all human vessels. 5 years ago, the galaxy took away our voice, she said. Today we speak with actions. Today we show them what humanity really means. The human ships plunged into the swarm like arrows shot into a storm. Behind them, the Council forces watched in stunned silence as beings who had been silenced gave their lives to save those who had silenced them. The final battle came not with the roar of weapons but with silence. Admiral Maria Santos watched from the bridge of her crippled flagship as Dr. Yamamoto's impossible weapon activated. The device looked small and simple, nothing more than a metal box floating in space between the human fleet and the Devourer swarm. But the science behind it represented 5 years of human innovation, built from ideas that the Council's most advanced species had never imagined. Quantum cascade initiated, Dr. Yamamoto reported from the science vessel Breakthrough. The signal is propagating through the machine network. What happened next would be talked about in Council records for 1,000 years. The Devourer machines, which had adapted to every weapon and absorbed every attack, suddenly began consuming themselves. Their own adaptive systems, turned against them by human engineering, started analyzing their own components as threats to be eliminated. The machine swarm tore itself apart in minutes. 50,000 vessels that had consumed entire star systems became clouds of scattered metal floating in space. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced was defeated not by superior firepower, but by human creativity turning the enemy's strength into weakness. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 47 human ships that had answered the Council's distress call, only 12 remained operational. Thousands of human lives had been lost protecting beings who had refused to even speak to them. Maria Santos stood in the medical bay of her ship, looking at rows of beds filled with wounded human soldiers. Some would recover. Others would carry the scars of this battle for the rest of their lives. All of them had volunteered to fight for people who had taken away humanity's voice. Admiral, her communications officer said, approaching with a data pad, "We're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Everyone wants to know what happened here." Maria took the pad and scrolled through hundreds of communications. Council species were sending their gratitude. Individual beings were sharing personal thanks. But most interesting were the messages from ordinary people throughout the galaxy, telling stories of mysterious human aid during the silent years. A Zephyrian family had found their dying child's crystal body restored overnight by unknown healers. A deep-mined colony had discovered their poisoned waters cleaned by invisible helpers. A hierarchy mining station had been saved from collapse by anonymous engineers who left supplies and vanished. Story after story poured in, revealing the scope of humanity's silent guardianship. While the Council had been debating policy, humans had been saving lives. While the elder species had been maintaining their ancient protocols, humanity had been solving problems they were too proud to ask for help with. Dr. Chen joined Maria in the medical bay, carrying her own data pad filled with messages. "The Council wants to meet," she said quietly. "They're requesting immediate diplomatic contact to discuss mutual cooperation in the face of galactic threats." Maria almost laughed at the formal language. "After 5 years of silence, now they want to talk. There's more," Dr. Chen continued. "Species across the galaxy are demanding that the Council restore our speaking privileges. Some are threatening to leave the Council if humanity remains silenced." Through the medical bay's windows, Maria could see the remnants of the Devourer swarm drifting in space like metallic snow. The threat was over, but the galaxy had learned something about itself in the process. They had learned that their careful ancient ways of doing things could not solve every problem. They had learned that sometimes the young, chaotic species they looked down on might have answers they desperately needed. 3 days later, Council Speaker Vorthon stood before the greatest assembly in galactic history. Every member species had sent representatives. The Great Hall of Concordia Prime was filled beyond capacity, with beings watching from every corner of Council space. The insect leader's 6 arms trembled as he spoke, a sign of deep emotion that few non-hierarchy beings had ever witnessed. "This Council has made many decisions over our long history," Vorthon began. We have guided the galaxy through wars, famines, and natural disasters. We have maintained peace between species who might otherwise have destroyed each other. We have built a civilization that spans the stars." He paused, looking toward the empty human section of the assembly. "But we have also made mistakes, and sometimes our greatest mistakes come from our greatest strengths. Our wisdom became pride. Our caution became fear. Our desire for harmony became rejection of anything different." On the great display screens, images appeared of human aid missions during the silent years. Medical stations treating any species without payment. Engineering teams solving problems overnight. Teachers working with alien children who had been abandoned by their own governments. 5 years ago, this council silenced humanity because we feared their differences, Vorthon continued. We told them to prove their worth through actions instead of words. We did not know that they were already proving their worth every day, in ways we were too proud to see. Crystal Song of Truth stood among the Zephyrian delegation. When he spoke, his harmonic voice carried shame that resonated through every crystal being in the hall. "We called human methods corruption," he said. "We did not understand that their different approaches were solving problems our methods could not address. We mistook innovation for destruction." The deep mind representative floated in his tank, branches moving slowly in patterns that expressed regret. "Our data was incomplete. Human industrial methods were not destroying planetary ecosystems. They were improving them in ways our models did not predict." One by one, the elder species stood to admit their errors. The hierarchy confessed that human aggression was actually determination to help others. The archive keepers revealed that human chaos was creativity that found solutions to ancient problems. Finally, Vorthon approached the empty human section of the assembly. 2 guards carried the golden speaking staff, the symbol of voice in the Galactic Council. "To humanity," Vorthon said, his voice carrying across space to human colonies throughout the galaxy, who spoke with actions when we took away their words, who saved those who silenced them, who proved that wisdom comes not from the length of one's existence, but from the depth of one's compassion." The council speaker's voice broke with emotion as he continued. "The council was wrong. Your voice has always been worthy. The galaxy is lesser without it. We offer not just the return of your speaking privileges, but our deepest apology for silencing you when we should have been listening." Dr. Sarah Chen received the message aboard the hospital ship Mercy, where she was treating wounded soldiers from a dozen different species. Human medics worked alongside council healers, sharing techniques that saved lives neither could have saved alone. She looked at the golden speaking staff offered in the transmission, then at the faces of her crew. Humans and aliens worked together in the medical bay, bound by their shared commitment to healing rather than divided by politics or pride. Sarah activated her communicator and sent her response to the council. "Tell them," she said quietly, "that humanity accepts their apology. Tell them we never stopped listening. And tell them that when the council is ready to hear what we've learned during the silent years, we have much to share." Council Speaker Vorthon received the message in his chambers, surrounded by reports of human aid stations opening on every major trade route. The humans were not demanding recognition or payment. They were simply continuing to do what they had always done, helping those who needed help. As he prepared for the next council session, where humanity would once again have a voice in galactic affairs, Vorthon reflected on the lesson his species had learned. Sometimes the greatest wisdom came from admitting when you were wrong, and sometimes the voice you most needed to hear was the one you had worked hardest to silence. The galaxy had been saved not by its oldest and wisest species, but by the young ones who refused to let pride overcome compassion. It was a lesson that would echo through council halls for generations to come, spoken in the voice of humanity, a voice that would never again be silenced.